This will be the lecture series for module number 2 on the anatomy of the nervous system, where we will focus specifically on the central nervous system. Today we're going to cover 3 different areas. The first one we're going to do is to locate the major structures of the central nervous system using anatomical directions. For those of you that have taken an anatomy course before, a lot of this will be very familiar. If you have not, please remember we'll sort of be using some of these same terms for anatomical directions throughout the course, so it will be helpful for you to know these terms for later on. Second, we're going to analyze the functions of the blood-brain barrier, looking at how it protects the brain from a variety of physical injuries, chemical injuries, and even infections. Lastly, we're going to look at a model of the central nervous system, or the CNS, from humans, and start to map out what some of the functions of the major parts of the brain. Now, we're only going to do a little bit of an introduction to these parts because we're going to come back to them later on in the course as we move through different functions like sleep, or annual rhythms, or emotion, or stress responses, or different kinds of mental illnesses. So right now we're just going to do a broad overview about the different parts of the central nervous system. To get us started, let's talk about anatomical directions. Okay, so this is just a picture from your textbook showing the neuraxis. The neuraxis is this imaginary line that runs up the spinal cord to the front of the brain. Now, in many mammals, in quadrupeds, the neuraxis is a straight line going from the tail, or the caudal part of the animal, up to the rostral part. Rostrum just means nose. So caudal is tail, rostrum is nose. So it makes it easier in quadrupeds to look at anatomical directions. The belly is always the ventrum or ventral surface, and the back is always the dorsal surface. Okay? Caudal is tail, rostral is nose, dorsal is the back, and ventral is the belly, or the ventral surface. Now, you can also think about this as the dorsal fin of a shark is on its back, the caudal fin of a shark is its tail, right? You may be able to use that if that's easier for you. In humans, though, the neuraxis turns. Because humans stand on 2 legs and are bipedal, it means that the neuraxis actually comes up the spinal cord, and then the brain, the central nervous system, starts to turn. So the rostral surface is here towards your frontal lobe. The caudal surface of your brain, or the tail surface of your brain, is back here near the occipital lobe, or the back of your brain. Okay? So if you're looking at just the brain itself, dorsal is on the top of the head, caudal is in the back of the head, rostral is in the front of the face, and ventral is basically just underneath your chin. But if you're looking at the spinal cord, it'll be just like it is in quadrupeds. So the dorsal surface will be here along the back, the caudal surface will be down here by the tail, the ventral surface will be along the belly, and of course the rostral surface would be up here towards the top of the spinal cord. Okay? In addition, we can also talk about how we might dissect a human brain or a central nervous system, like a spinal cord, into different sections. And by understanding how we call these sections, it will help you to understand what parts of the brain you're looking at. I'll try to refer back to these often as we look at different sections of the brain. So a sagittal section is one that divides the brain from the front to the back. So these 2 in green you can see, so I've tried to color code them. So sagittal sections are surrounded by a green box. Basically, a sagittal section would be on the side of the brain if you were looking at the outside of it, like here. It could also be a sagittal cut right through the middle of the brain. So this is the very center of a human brain. So again, we've cut it from the rostral surface near the nose to the ventral surface in the back of the brain. Okay, so that's a sagittal cut from the front to the back. A coronal cut, which is here in orange, a coronal cut basically cuts from the top of the brain down to the bottom, and it divides it from front to back. So coronal cuts basically are, think of it as like slices moving from the front to the back of the brain. So this would allow you to see the inside of the brain, and you can see some of the interesting distinctions in color here. We have what we call gray matter, which here looks kind of orange on the outside edge, and white matter, which is towards the center of the brain. White matter, as we'll talk about in chapter 3, is made up of particular kinds of pieces of neurons, so we'll come back and talk about that later, about why it's white and gray matter. Third are horizontal sections. Horizontal sections basically start from the bottom and cut up to the top, okay? So you can see here there's a horizontal section in blue. Again, I've color-coded all of these. So it starts at the base of the brain and you might then start cutting up. So this would be the front of the brain here. This would be the back of the brain back here, right? So this is the rostrum. This is the caudal portion of the brain. And then you can also denote the brain by having a medial or lateral side. So medial just means middle. So this is the medial part of the brain here in the center. This is the lateral part of the brain off on the side, right? So lateral just means side and medial means middle. So now you can test to see if you can identify all of these. Now that we've just gone over them, do you recognize them? And again, you can use the color coding. You can use the cuts themselves. Which one is the coronal cut? Which one is the sagittal cut? Which one is the horizontal cut? Pause the video and think about it. Great. So this is the sagittal cut here in green because it cuts from the front to the back, right? So you can see here, here's the rostral part of the brain. Here's the caudal part of the brain in the back. This is a coronal cut. So this, of course, is cut it on the side, right? So it allows you to see towards the inner portions of the brain, cutting from the front to the back. This is a horizontal cut, right? Because it cuts across a horizontal plane, moving from the top and the bottom of the brain here in blue.